Okay, so I really, really want to talk about a specific topic today. It's self-care and burnout, but there's a reason that I want to talk about it, and I want to talk about it differently than how we normally do. So there was a question that I saw recently, somebody posted, a woman had posted, and it was, I'm exhausted and burned out. So she's recognizing that she's already there. She is already in it. She's not on the way to burnout. She's in burnout. And the question that she had about it was, how do I prioritize self-care without feeling guilty about putting myself first?
Mm.
And of course, I wanted to support her, but I was thinking about it, and I love the question because I don't think it's an uncommon question. I think a lot of us have it. Like, I know I've been in exhaustion and burnout, like beyond
Yeah.
overwhelm. I know you've said a number of times that you have been in full-blown burnout where you had to just ditch everything and just like, I'm not here for any of the stuff right now. It cannot be accessed. Um, and so I wanted to talk about it on here so we can bring it to everybody because from my perspective, it goes so far outside self-care.
Mm.
Okay.
I love
So
that.
yes. So what do I mean by that, right? This lady, for example, she recognizes that she needs self-care. But there's a reason that she hasn't been doing it to this point. So, I mean, we all know we're supposed to be doing self-care. It's every which way you look, somebody's talking about self-care, myself included. I hope to bring a little bit of a different perspective than what you typically hear, but no matter what, you look around, you know you're supposed to be doing self-care because everybody's talking about it. It's in books, it's on YouTube, it's podcasts, whatever. It's all
Right.
around us. But for some reason, we're still not doing it. So that's what
Mm.
I want to talk about. Before you can even do the self-care, you got to recognize why you haven't been doing it. Why haven't you been making a priority? So I have a few thoughts that were coming to mind around that. And so I want to share, I guess, like three tips, if you will, to help people kind of come to the conclusion around why they haven't been doing it so they can get over that hurdle and start implementing it. So the first of those things was we don't give ourselves permission to do it, first of
Mm.
all, right? So I cannot tell you how many times you've probably heard the same thing. Like, I don't have time for me. I got to take care of my kids. I got to take care of this, that, and the other,
Right.
right? And the problem with that is we're not prioritizing ourselves. We're prioritizing everybody else. I think a lot of women don't think that we can give ourselves permission to put ourselves first when we have kids. There's this misconception that if I put myself first, I'm putting my kids second. And that's selfish. My job as a mom is to make sure they're always taken care of first. So to that,
Yeah.
I would say yes, and or no, and right? Yes, our kids need to be taken care of first, especially our younger ones who still rely on us to make sure that the world goes round, right? So we're talking about like life-sustaining stuff, though. We're talking about making sure that their well-being is forefront in our mind. My kids are always going to be fed, clothed, educated, loved, supported, right? All of these things that make sure that they thrive on a even the most basic level as human beings, that they are cared for. And that doesn't mean that their entire schedule, everything that they want in life needs to come before just the bare minimum
Mm.
that I could do for myself. So there's room here to rethink how we look at that. Yes, we're going to care for our kids first. Of course we do. And even for people who don't have kids, maybe you're caring for elderly parents or you have a spouse who has military spouses, for example, our spouse has a very important mission. And so, of course, we need to support that first, but that doesn't mean we're second, right? There's space for all of us at the front. So, what I'm saying is, when we prioritize ourselves, when I say make yourself priority number one, that doesn't mean that your kids don't get cared for. That means that you also get cared for.
Right.
There's space for all of it. And so, I go deeper into self-care and how we make that a norm in our life and micro moments of self-care and whole self-care and lots of you and I talk about this all the time. I talk about it in my solo videos. So I have an entire playlist curated for self-care topics. So what I'm going to do at the end is link to it, but I'll drop a whole bunch of links in the description too, so people can dive deeper into the self-care. So, do we have space for self-care? Well, it still feels like I don't. No matter what you say, Heather, it still feels like I don't. I talk about how we can make sure that you do, and it's so easy. It's not as hard as people think it is. So the first thing is like make sure that you are a priority. Stop telling yourself there's no space for you at the front of that priority list. There is, and it doesn't make you selfish, doesn't make you a bad mom, and it doesn't mean that you're not caring for your kids. You look like you wanted to say something.
No, go ahead. You finish the three, and then I'm going to say something. I was going to say something, but I'll keep it. I'll
Are
save
you
it.
sure? I don't want you to forget it.
No. Well, okay, I'll just jump in real fast.
Jump
When
in.
you're saying this, it reminds me of for the longest time, people think like that your self care or it's like a weighted scale,
Mm.
right? And so I like to say, and I know you've seen this and heard about it and talked about it, but people I think need to be more aware that it's more like the pie, right? And you're
Mm.
dividing it into the different things and the priorities that are important to you.
Yeah.
Because when you put it on a scale, like your other people are always going to kind of be more important and more of a priority if you're saying, especially as women, because we're so selfless typically, right? Is to like care for everyone else before we care for ourselves. And I think if they look at it as more of like that pie versus the weighted scales, then I think that might be easier for them to kind of accept.
Yeah, what you're talking about, I talk about a lot through the lens of like work-life balance. But of
Mhm.
course, when you break it down, it's not 50-50, right? Because your work
Right.
isn't just one thing and your life isn't just one thing. All the things that go into your work and all the things that go into your life get broken into pieces as well. And so self-care is one of those pieces, and it has to have a piece of that pie. And it has to have a big enough piece so that you don't go into that overwhelm or burnout. So I'm glad you brought up um that idea. Like, don't look at it like when we're,
Yeah.
are we weighing it, is it 50-50?
Yeah.
No, like we're breaking it down so everything gets the piece that it needs. So
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah,
because even
solid
in the
thinking.
work life balance, like there's that. But I think that in a matter of like prioritizing yourself,
Hmm.
we should look at it as that whole pie as well.
Yeah, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the second idea that came to mind when I was thinking about like why aren't we doing the self-care, what has been keeping us from doing it at this point, even though that we know that we need it and we're supposed to, and all the experts and all the people keep telling us to do it, right? Why aren't we doing it? So the other thing that came to mind was around the idea of how we identify. I'm going to use the word identity, but what I'm really talking about is the roles that we take on in life. So a lot of people like if somebody asks me about my identity, I might say, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a military now retire spouse, I'm a business owner, all the things. Those are the roles. Those aren't necessarily our identity. I'm not even going to dig into that. That's not what this is about, but to be clear, because I have done other videos about that as well. And so I don't want people to be like, oh, she's contradicting herself. I'm not. And also, if you're curious, go watch one of those videos.
Yeah.
But when I'm talking about I'm just going to use identity because it's a simple term. And what I mean is these roles that we take on, what do we assume or what do we believe that fulfilling these roles has to mean? And so when you look at it that way, so for example, I'm a mom, so I have to make sure that my kids are cared for. I have to make sure that, all the things that go along with that. I'm a wife, so I have to be the best, wife that I'm able to be for my spouse. I stay at home. Even though I work from home, I'm at home. So maybe I've decided that that means I have to be the one that cooks. I have to keep the house up and have it clean before everybody gets home. I have to make sure that the laundry is taken care of for the family. These are just examples, right? Um, I'm a business owner, so that means that I have to work a certain number of hours a day and I have to do such and such amount of things. I'm a solopreneur, so that means I have to carry the whole load, right? All of these roles that we take on, we assume all of these responsibilities that come with it. But I think some of those responsibilities, of course, are necessary, but some of them are not. There's stories we're carrying around what we think we're supposed to be doing. Well, if I'm a stay-at-home mom or if I'm a work from home mom, then that means I should be available to what? be a part of the PTA. What are these things that we think we're supposed to be doing? And how are they taking up time in our day that they don't need to be taking up? Time that could be dedicated to our self-care. So if
Yeah.
I think I'm a mom, I'm a spouse, I'm a daughter, I'm a good neighbor, I'm whatever. Oh, I am intended to take care of all these other people. That's my identity. That's the role that I play, right? So those are my responsibilities. At what point do you go, I'm a human. I have to take care of myself. Part of my responsibilities is to me,
Yeah.
right? We have to stop assuming that we have to carry all of these things based on the roles that we take on that eat up all the time in our day to the point where we don't have time left for ourselves. So
Yeah.
imagining what are these things, just thinking about what are all the things I am associating with responsibilities that come from the roles that I play? And are they truly necessary? Or did somebody tell me they were? Or did I assume they were, but they don't really suit me? So we've got to ask that question of ourselves and really give ourselves an or maybe even journal about it and give ourselves an opportunity to think through it and see what really do I not need to be doing where I can put some of me time in there, my self-care, taking care of me in that space.
That reminds me of something else. I feel like I'm going to have a little tidbit after each one,
I
but
hope you
here.
do.
So this one reminds me of I started being real stringent on my calendar and canceling things. Like, so I would sign up for meetings or schedule events or things that I wanted to kind of look at. But then I started to get real specific and real stringent on my calendar because I know me and I know that if I do too many meetings and then I'm not going to be able to progress and not be able to actually achieve my goals because I get
Mhm.
so overwhelmed with all of the things, even though they might be helpful, they might be great, good things. I had to start really deciding and being real stringent on my calendar and canceling things and or rescheduling them for a later date because maybe my week was already too much
Mhm.
that I would have to do that. So what I started to do was really at the beginning of the week look at my week and say, you know what, I don't have the energy for that this week, and scheduling it out or just canceling altogether and saying this is not a good fit for me. I don't want to waste your time or my time, you know? So that's one thing that I started doing because then that helps me in my personal life as well, right? Like then I'm not so drained and not so overwhelmed.
Yeah. So I don't know if I said this on the first thing, which was, make yourself priority, but in case I didn't say it, you just reminded me it's about you have to give yourself permission, right?
Yeah.
Like, even if we know, even if you're like, oh, okay, cool, that's a great point. Like, that makes sense. I feel that you still have to overcome the hurdle of giving yourself permission. And sometimes we can't even, it sounds simple, but it's not. Sometimes we can't even give ourselves the permission to do that thing. And sometimes we need somebody else to give us the permission first before we can give ourselves that permission. So let me give you that permission to give it to yourself. Not
Yeah.
and not you,
I
Rita, because it
agree.
sounds like you've done that for yourself. But anybody who's not giving themselves that permission, you kind of need that nudge. Let me give you that permission to do that.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that oftentimes women, especially if we've scheduled something, we feel obligated to it. We feel like we have to, and if we don't, then other people may judge us or may not like us or whatever the case is, right?
Yeah.
There's some type of stigma or feeling against like, oh, I don't want to cancel because I don't want this person to react in a certain way. And I just had to get over that because I've, like you've mentioned, I've been burnt out a million times, and I started to recognize like the things over time that were actually my problem.
Yeah. That's since we are talking about burnout, but since you just said that, it reminded me of a story that I want to share. It's Today, it's how I remind myself when I'm noticing that I haven't been given myself the care that I need in all of the areas that need to be attended to, so my whole well-being is on point. Um, like I know, like I'm in my groove right now. This is years in the making where my self-care regimen is on point and I'm still human and I still have a lot of responsibilities and sometimes I still slip. One of the things that I go back to is the reminder of the point in my life where I was probably as an adult the absolute most overwhelmed and wholly burned out. Like absolutely burned out. And it was I've mentioned this before, but in case everybody doesn't know the story, is when my husband was deployed. So when he deployed, as when we were a family of four, my daughter was 9 months. My son was somewhere between 2 and 3, like just under 3. And it was just me, and we were in a town that we hadn't been in that long, kind of like the story of your military life. You're always in a town you haven't been in that long. So we're in a town we haven't been in that long. And I say that to say, like, I didn't have a super solid core group. I had no family there. I had some friends at that point, but besides the fact that, friendships take time to really build that bond and that trust. um, I was in the mindset like I was supposed to do it all. And because they were also doing it all, I was going to put my stuff on them. They had spouses too who were deployed and in the field and all the things, and they were doing the same thing I was doing. I'm not going to put my stuff on them. So, so I've got a 9 month old and a not quite 3-year-old, and I'm trying to do all the things. And I've convinced myself because this was, let's say, oof, oh, I don't want to do math. This was like almost a decade ago, maybe not quite. Right. So this was long before I was a life coach, long before I had all of these tools in my toolbox. And I had myself convinced that I was doing self care because most mornings I was taking an hour and I was going to the gym. And that was about it in the
Mm-hmm.
way of self care for me. So I am exhausted and I am short and I miss my husband. And truth be told, I'm scared because he's in a war zone. All right.
Yeah.
And I'm carrying all of this all by myself with itty bitties who don't get it. They don't know. Like, I have no idea what's
Right.
going on. And they're still like mom is still the center of their universe at that age. So they're good. They've got what they need, but I have nothing that I need. I have no outlet. I have no like means to rejuvenate and really truly fill my own cup. And I finally get to the point where um I'm just absolutely done. I'm
Mm-hmm.
miserable. I am short. I am depressed. I am overwhelmed. I am in a bad mental space, a bad emotional space. And my in-laws come for a visit and they wanted to help out and help me with the kids and whatnot. And there was a moment where I am standing in my kitchen. There was no particular conversation that was happening. I just lost it. I
Mm-hmm.
finally could no longer hold up the guard, and the wall crumbled, and I burst into tears in front of my mother-in-law. And I was like, "Can I have a hug?" And she was like, "Oh my God, yes, of course." There was a moment where there was no option anymore. There was no more holding it together. At some point, that is what happens, but it doesn't need to. And so
Mm-hmm.
we kind of got to wrap up here. There's one final note I wanted to leave on this, like why we're not doing the self-care. And that was because I think a lot of us don't fully understand what self-care is. Self-care is not just going to get the pedicure. Self-care is not just taking a nap. Self-care is taking moments all day long to fill your cup all over again because all day long your cup is going to empty. So you've got to do your deep breathing all day, every day. You've got to check your thoughts. What kind of thoughts are you let zapping your energy? Are you letting negativity set like come in and sit down? Are you are you letting thoughts that don't serve you take up that energy and tank your energy? When we talk about self-care, you've got to talk about your mental and emotional and spiritual as well as the physical. Otherwise, of course, even if you're doing, the hour of gym time every morning or a walk, that's why you're still not feeling fulfilled and rejuvenated is because perhaps the idea of what you think self-care is doesn't encompass everything that you really truly need to be cared for. So making sure that your idea of self-care includes things that you're doing all day, every day. And one of the biggest things you can do is check your mindset. What thoughts are you keeping? What thoughts are you letting run wild? And like shifting them. When you notice if they're energy zappers, shift them. And if you need help on that, you know where to go. So anyway, so to wrap it up, right? Give yourself permission to make yourself a priority. How are you identifying? What roles are you taking on, and what responsibilities are you assuming that you have to play in those roles, and what can you get rid of to make space for you? And then, do you truly have a picture of what self-care really means to you, and what is actually going to give you the energy and the rejuvenation that you need? So, okay. So you can go ahead to this playlist here and check out more tips for whole self-care.